Check podcasts.
The Bread and Butter Collective is a collection of hospitality professionals working together to help strengthen our industry to build strong culture, community, and sustainability.
I'm Kalen McNeil.
And I'm Sam Jones. And this is the Bread and Butter Podcast. Well, good morning, everyone. Wait, Kalen didn't answer. Wait, Kalen's not here. It's just me. I got the whole place to myself. Oh my God. Kalen, unfortunately, had a car breakdown and couldn't be here today. And normally we would just call it quits, but we were smart. We're going to make this the first episode of Sam's Drip. It's a new coffee podcast that we're going to host, and we're going to do it on the back of Bread and Butter. And for our first guest, we're going to get John Sanders from Origin Coffee and the Vancouver Coffee Academy. John's been in the business almost as long as I've been alive, and he's got lots to say. And I really appreciate you just coming on board. Such short notice, John. What's up, and how's your coffee this morning?
Well, Sam, thank you so much, first of all, and happy to be here, excited. I don't know if I've ever done a podcast, to be honest with you.
Really?
Absolutely.
This is a virgin podcast for you?
This is probably my first podcast.
Wow.
I'd have to say, I don't think I've ever did one, so I'm happy to do it with you, Sam.
Well, thanks, John. How long have you been involved in coffee?
I'm going on year 35 right now.
Okay.
Started in 1989 here in Vancouver, actually, just by a freak accident.
Really?
Just a chance encounter, walking into a coffee roasting plant, and thought that was the greatest thing around. It's like, what the heck is that? And then I had my first coffee latte, and it was over after that. You know, I kind of fell in love with this product, and I like to tell people I haven't worked a day in 35 years. And I feel like that, you know, until it comes to the government and all the paperwork and all the BS that goes with running a business and stuff like that. But I wouldn't change it. I'd be here. I don't mind getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning and working 10 or 12-hour days. And it's good. It's truly the bridge to relationships for everybody, whether it's a coffee shop or a farmer or a consumer that doesn't even sometimes drink the coffee. They just like being in a coffee shop. So it's a great product. It's brought me around the world and given me a huge perspective on coffee, not just in our backyard here in Victoria for you guys or Vancouver for us over here, but I've had roasteries in Seattle and putting together 3 right now around the world.
Sorry, John, what do you mean by putting together a coffee roaster? You want to explain that? Because, I mean, some people just aren't going to have an idea of what that means.
Well, it's not for the faint of heart. You know, a lot of people want to do it. And, you know, the fact of the matter is a lot of people have done it, especially here in British Columbia. There's a small amount of people, not even small, we're talking dozens, that have bought a small roaster and thrown it into a garage or a small, you know, commercial space and turned it on, and they're roasting very small batches of coffee and stuff like that. And but we're going past that. We're going into production mode where, you know, we're producing, you know, thousands of kilos of coffee a week, and setting up a program with equipment, sustainable usage of equipment, trying to get away from fossil fuels as much as possible now. But it's an advantage. I mean, you got to have your space, you got to have your capital to do it. It's not a cheap adventure, I'd say, to put together a roasting plant nowadays that can handle about, you know, a couple thousand kilos of coffee a week is probably about a $350,000 check.
Wow.
That's just to get going. That doesn't include your working capital and everything else you need to survive over the time and that. And so I find the market here in Vancouver especially, Sam, has grown greatly. A lot of people have jumped into the market for coffee roasting for sure. And there's a lot of cafes to go along with it. But the way they got into the market was, bare bones lower quality equipment, no pollution control, no permits, just roasting coffee. I just got a little small roaster. Why can't I do it?
Well, that sounds like how I started. Sounds like how I'm doing it. No, I'm
No,
doing a
well, I
little bit
think
more.
we all looked at it that way. I started in Seattle, and it was definitely the most stringent and still is the most stringent place in the world to try to permit a coffee roaster. And so we had to do it legally from the start to the finish there.
Is that
And there's a
because of air quality control, John?
100%
Yeah.
air quality control. We're not a pollution industry. We do not produce enough particulate pollution under PM10, particulate matter 10.
But
Nor do we
can
produce enough.
on the count of three, can we say what we do produce? One,
Yeah,
2, 3. Nuisances.
we're a nuisance. We're a smell and a smoke industry.
Yeah.
We don't ever hit the threshold on pollution, but we do hit the threshold on people not wanting to smell things sometimes and smoke.
Hmm.
And we produce 1,500 different compounds when we're roasting, and going up into an afterburner is just not always the best way, but sometimes it's the only way to do it. You burn fossil fuels to take care of smoke and smell only. And it's a hard pill to swallow when you get 600, 700, $800 a month gas bills just to create a little bit of, and I agree with it. I'm on an island, I'm on Granville Island.
Okay.
I would piss a lot of people off if there was some smoke blowing out my stack every day and stuff like that. So I can't say it's not necessary. But
But maybe
Sam, I would like to lead into this with how you have transformed your business. Sam got rid of his pollution control and got into a water precipitator, and it's a device that literally uses no fossil fuels, a little bit of electricity to run a pump, which the exhaust stream runs through this water, and anything starts to cool it down. Once you get below a certain temperature in Fahrenheit, about 115, 120, all the water soluble stuff in that exhaust stream will fall out and go into your water stream and be circulated and filtered out. And really, all you have coming up your stack anymore is steam.
right.
And you have a very low chance of fire now because it's all cooled down. There's no way that fire is going to get through that stream of water and that. So Sam has put one of these in and lowered his gas bill, his operating bill, lowered his carbon output a lot. It's a way to do it. The technology is increasing a lot. And unfortunately, for a lot of people here in Vancouver, the GVRD is now getting involved, and the air pollution control industry is taking the coffee industry under its wings and is going to start coming here and starting to mandate what has to be done.
And do you think that's going to restrict more people opening, or do you think it's going to curtail how people are operating and maybe put a crimp on how people are operating and maybe slow down or make it harder to get into the business?
Absolutely, and I think it should. I think the playground should be fair for everybody. If you're
Yeah.
not going to do that right, and we're having to put in a 50,000 afterburner and all that, then it's not fair. You got to do it the right way, the right thing. You got to abide. You got to do it. We may not like it, but we have to align and we have to deal with it. And stuff. And after 35 years. And Sam, I go around the world and there's no pollution control in some of these countries on coffee roasters, and it's not
Right.
a big deal and all that. But in some places, Seattle, New York City, here in Vancouver's pretty Wild West still. California, South Coast Air Quality Management District, really, really tight. And we got to even measure how much NOx and CO2 and everything's coming out of the stack. So
Wow.
climate change is forcing everybody to take a look at this. They're starting to look at how we can do this. The first all-electric coffee roaster came out from Probot. And
Right.
there's a lot of gas that's going to be phased out over the time. Natural gas, eventually, propane, absolutely. The good news is there's already technology to actually run these coffee roasters on biofuel.
Oh, yeah. Like just
And
like old grease oil from McDonald's.
yeah,
Would that
instead of
work?
smelling roasted peanuts, you're going to smell French fries,
Ooh,
uh,
ooh.
or something like that. It's cleaned up and it burns well, and it's got good value for BTUs in it, and
Okay.
it's got the ability. But the problem is, they're not going to let me put a 350-gallon tank of biofuel outside of my door here in Granville Island.
No, probably not. On a bigger view of things in environmental, when we're talking about putting afterburners in, it's about 3 to 5 times the amount of gas that you would need to run your coffee roaster to begin with. And there's other ways to do that, as you said. Uh, but a whole coffee roasting system that's gone electric, how much how much do you think? How much power imbalance is there between asking that much off the electrical grid, say, and that much in actual gas? Because I know coffee roasters don't take a lot of gas. It's the afterburners that really crank it up. Is it worth doing a wholesale switch to an electric coffee roaster? It feels like you would have to have so much energy going into there to create that much heat. I don't know. Does that seem like a
I'll
reasonable
give you an
thing for you to
example.
do?
I'll give you an example. A company, Mars Candy, they're coffee roasters too, and did a job with them. They had a gas-fired Petrocini coffee roaster, a 30 kilo, and they bought a tangential roaster from Probot that could roast thousands of kilos every 7 minutes, and it needed 800 amps to run the
Whoa.
blowers.
800
800
amps.
amps of power to run the blowers on this roast tangential
And
roaster.
that's just the impeller, just to move air through your
Well, that's
roasting
the heated
systems.
air, It's a type of heated air system. There's no open flame on these. It's a massive thousands of degrees heated air going in, and over the course of, minutes, this coffee's roasted on the other side. We can roast coffee in 90 seconds, right now in today's technology, or we could take 2 hours if we wanted to. But it's a fast process. The amount of energy needed electricity wise, they've got smaller units. I've roasted on electric probots before.
Okay.
You're roasting on an infrared coffee roaster right now, which is different technology, and
Hmm.
they all work. They just respond differently. Some of them are better for the environment. And that's really the only reason this issue is becoming. It's an environmental question. Do we continue to use fossil fuels to produce food products? Is
Huh.
there another way to do it? The bread and butter of it is, low carbon, output as much as possible with the best result. And it's clean burning fuel
Yeah.
compared to diesel and other stuff like that. It's not, but it's still a fossil fuel, and it's always going to be in that conversation.
Okay.
And whatever we do here in North America or in the really developed world will never be able to catch on in, the underdeveloped world. They just don't have the money, the technology to change over into these systems. They're not going to buy a $70,000 electric coffee roaster when their, $20,000 gas roaster is still working okay.
Right. And you know that and come by that opinion because you do work all over the world, don't you? You get called out to do jobs on every continent. Is that fair to say?
You're probably, yeah. I mean, right now finishing a job, just a roaster extraction in Morocco, going into Olympia, Washington for a client.
Wow.
There was a roaster we got out of Norway, going into California for a client. There's a roaster we took out of Italy that's going into the Commonwealth of Dominica and the Caribbean islands. There's a roaster, a 1906 roaster we got out of a farmhouse in Belgium that's going into a operation in El Anchovy, Spain,
Wow, that's kind of cool.
and all that. And so
1906, did you say?
Probably somewhere
Uh,
between, early 1900s. We're not for sure. It's a PERFEKT. It's original and all that. It's a magnificent piece. It was running on diesel. It'd been sitting in the bottom of this, in a basement of this farmhouse in Belgium, a town called Tournai, Belgium, 2,500 years old.
wow.
And the history of that was mind blowing. But it'd been sitting in this room for 60 years untouched. It still worked when we got there and turned it on. And we even found some, you know, it was brown, but in reality, it was green coffee that had been sitting up above the roaster for 60 some years.
What?
And I got a
Wow.
sample of it. I'll show it to you one day, Sam. And it's actually brown. It is oxidized so much that it was brown. It lost all its moisture, but it's 60 some year old green coffee.
Wow.
Uh, yeah,
That,
it
that
looked like
that's
it.
not the same as like the old coffee that the guy in Japan stores in his freezer, right? That's different. This is just like
He never
lying
did a
out.
freezer store. He did climate control, humidity and
Oh,
temperature and all that.
oh, that wasn't in his freezer.
Never the freezer. Cryogenic George Howe is the freezer man.
Okay.
George Howe, very great coffee man, and some of the best coffees I've ever smelled came from George, of Kenya, that he's known for. When it's shipped into the Heinz roastery in Seattle, we had there in East Lake, there, Lake Union. They come in little boxes, vacuum packed, and it was an event just to have this box delivered by UPS and open up this box, and like the smell is contagious for green coffee that's fresh. It's like alfalfa hay, just beautiful and fragrant and sweet and all that. And we could open it up in our shop, and all the customers too, because we had a retail shop at that time. We were like, "What is that? Where'd that come from?" And that.
Wow.
So there's a lot of reasons for it. I believe in it. I actually believe in freezing roasted coffee too, Sam.
Yeah, I was
After
just going to ask you about that. I mean, most people hear that you either do freeze it or you never freeze it. And the people, I don't know, it feels like the people who say freeze it have always been kind of held off and disregarded because just don't freeze coffee. But doesn't it just preserve it if you do it right? And how do you do that right? Is there a way to freeze roasted coffee well?
I think you need to have a freezer that can actually freeze to begin with. Not a little dorm freezer ain't going to work so well. It's anytime you take a product down past a certain temperature, it's going to conserve a lot. It's going to hold that freshness factor in. And I really think a lot of the misinformation comes from the fact that we were told never to put coffee in the refrigerator.
Right.
But 90% of the coffee that comes out, and probably today still, is ground coffee. And it will act just like a baking soda, and it will absorb it's a living organism, and it's still got orangey. It's gonna accept odors and moisture and give it the same stuff away. And so if it's in your fridge and you got garlic and onions, it will absorb all those odors. But in
Huh.
your freezer in a bag, we've even grind coffee straight as a frozen product. We can drink it. I'll put it up on the table with anybody, and you guys tell me which is which. I do it with a lot of people, and especially dark roast and decaf and coffees that are really fragile, that don't have a great life on the shelf. We're talking, maybe days and weeks, never a month.
Yeah,
You know, I'm gonna
I
take.
remember years ago carrying decaf and a couple of different coffees from Espresso Vivace in Seattle, and at the time it was one of my favorite coffees. And to get his decaf up here was really special for me. But I would freeze it right away, and I would only pull it out as I needed it. And I would take my 2 pound bag. I think it came in 2 pound bags. And I would break that up into half-pound pouches, and I would have those like labeled and put in my freezer and pull out half a pound of this precious decaf coffee and put in my little tiny hopper that I'd make a little hopper out of a plexiglass tube, so I didn't have the whole hopper, so I could just fit half a pound in my grinder at a time. And it was the freshest decaf all the time, and I used to love doing that. And then I got people used to make you used to say that I didn't know what I was talking about by freezing my coffee, and you can't do that. It's like, well, it's just about how you do it and how you pull it out of the freezer, and you don't put the coffee back in the freezer once it's out. Is that right?
Well, I mean, if you were to take it out of the freezer and dump out 50 grams for a pot of coffee and put it right back in, there's nothing wrong with that.
As long as it doesn't thaw out and get
Yeah,
condensation
you're
on
not
it, I
want a
guess, right?
condensation issue here. You either gonna, use it, put it back in. It's only out for a few minutes, no problem. But if you're gonna leave it out for a while and that, nah, it could be in eventually maybe a little water. But you know what now? Now they're talking about water is the key to the grinding and the espresso extraction and all that.
People
So
spraying with little spritzers.
absolutely. Recently, this university professor from Portland State is getting big into coffee and talking a lot about things and all these experiments he's doing and stuff like that. And they come up with this brilliant idea to wet the coffee a little bit before you grind it or as you're grinding it, and they thought it was some aha moment. And I want to reflect back to you in Camel Sun College there. Well, how many years ago was that?
Oh, it's quite a while ago now.
And
Yeah.
these engineering students, and I don't know if any of these guys in the SCA understand this engineering college in Victoria figured this out. They knew this. They just didn't know how to take it into production.
No,
They
I
didn't
didn't
know how
either.
to, but they had it, they knew that this was part of the process of being able to deal with some of these issues and that. So what Portland State did was, developed a while back from Camel Sun, I believe, and I think they had a good handle on where they were trying to head with this, but funding and, a small college just don't have the ability to push that through.
No. And I remember when we were doing that and trying to cool down the coffee as it was being ground, and we were still dealing with all the static and stuff. But the hard part was cooling down the burrs so your coffee doesn't cook, and you preserve the oils and the freshness of the coffee. So when you extract it, you get that in the cup. You don't just burn it off on the burrs. And I went down to a trade show just as we were making this, and I was talking to one of the head engineers at Nuvo Simonelli, who said that there's no way we could be cooling down the burrs. It doesn't work that way. And what they were doing, which is
Heating them up.
they were heating them up.
They
And
still do.
yeah, and I don't. I guess I understand that if you heat it up not too hot, you're able to maintain a stable temperature, but that stable temperature is still too hot. And he tried forever to get his burrs to cool down. They gave up on that and just went to heating them up because it was so much easier. But you're right, the kids at Camosun College had that nailed a long time ago.
The reason, that burr is issue, Sam, is, when metal heats up, it expands. And so when we get that, our grind starts increasing greatly. We'll start running a faster shot if we get too hot. And then you start cranking your grinder down to compensate for that. And then it cools down. And the next thing you know, you ain't going to get nothing out of there because it's shrunk back to the millimeter where it's supposed to be and less at that point. And that, and that happens not really because it happens because the grinders are not built properly. Every motor has a certain duty that it can run, continuous, 10 seconds on, 20 seconds off. Mazers are known to run for 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. They actually have a tag that usually says do not run more than 30 minutes in 1 hour, or we will have a fire hazard. And all that. So every grinder has a motor which has a duty cycle that if you match that to your particular way of doing things, you can relatively keep your windings and all your stuff at the temperature it was designed to be, and you can eliminate a lot of that. But these grinding manufacturers, because of the torque needed to start some of this off, they need either a big motor or a small motor and a lot of coils to jumpstart all this underneath the whole system. And so it just creates more energy bung, which creates more wear and tear and friction, which heats it up.
Yeah,
So,
it takes quite a bit of amperage to start the motor when it's already got beans locked in the burrs like that, right?
it takes amperage to start any motor. That's why coils are involved to give it a big jump of voltage, just to jump
Uh,
start. Not the amps that run it, it's the voltage that you need to use to start it.
oh, okay. Huh.
The amps are where you use the electricity, the voltage starts everything. So
Hmm.
that's
All right.
why a variable frequency drive and slow starting, like for roasters, to slow things, your engine or your motor to start slow or finish slow is good, because abruptly stopping and starting all these is really hard on your motors.
Well, I'm glad we got a variable speed adapter coming for my new roaster.
There you go.
In your travels lately over to Europe and whatnot, you must have been to coffee shops and seen cafes and roasteries. Do you see any trends coming out of Europe right now as to things that we should be looking towards, or are they ahead of us in terms of coffee culture anymore, or is the Pacific Northwest kind of its own coffee culture now that doesn't really pull from anywhere else?
I think the Pacific Northwest will never lose its standing of being, the coffee mecca, but we're not in regards to that as it was in the old days. There's so many different ways of people doing coffee on the West Coast here now. There's a lot of leaders, a lot of followers,
Yeah,
and so I don't think that will ever go away. We started something big. Starbucks is still here. We have to always include those guys in any conversation we have,
right.
whether you like them or not. They spread the gospel around the world, and they're producing results that everybody in the industry can actually get a piece of. They don't hurt the industry whatsoever.
Yeah, I certainly think they grow the industry. I mean, I don't think I'd be in the coffee industry if it weren't for Starbucks.
I
There
would
wouldn't
be
be an
here, but I
industry.
don't know if we would be where we're at. They spread the gospel of specialty coffee around the world for people to come behind and say, okay, they're right, but I can do it better.
Yeah, right. They
And
take all the
so
education and they give everyone a real good head start to coffee
let me
education.
tell you what happened. I was flying and got into the terminal, and I wanted a coffee. So I went to a Starbucks and ordered an Americano. And they had a lineup, so I kind of popped to the side to watch what they were doing. And so, they took the hot water from the water tower, which was great,
Yeah.
good temperature, but they never activated any of their groups. So they had a cup of a batched out espresso sitting there, and I saw
No,
that guy come over there and pop a
no.
couple tops in there, no measurement, no nothing, and handed it over, called for an Americano. And so I walked over there, and I have to say, I called him out, after
Yeah.
so much time on the airplane. I'm like, hold on here. I ordered an Americano, and I saw you throw some coffee out of that cup in there, but you didn't brew no shot. Where'd that shot come from? He goes, well, we brew them in here. And I said, no, 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 no. I want a fresh Americano. Why are you guys? They only had like 6 or 7 people in the lineup, and they're batching out espresso in these places and all that, and airports.
What?
So whether or not, it's just a fact that you know, people are going to approach it different ways, different cafes. I believe the market in Europe is way more mature than the market over here.
Is that just age? Just because they've been doing it
No, I
for a
just
longer
think it's
time? Or
definition, and like the Europeans, they know what they want. They're pretty set on it.
hmm.
We're kind of, we got a lot of new entrants, a lot of people coming in, a lot of different ways. I think if you went into Copenhagen and Denmark and Norway and all those areas, you would see really a lot of similar styles of coffee happening, but not the sheer number of people trying to do them.
Okay, that's interesting. So would it be fair to say that in other parts of the world, you can actually tell how they're going to brew their coffee essentially, or deal with their coffee by kind of geographic region, whereas here in the Pacific Northwest you have so many people and so many different ideas that you can't really pin it down. You can't say this is a Pacific Northwest style,
Not
because you
anymore.
used to be able to say that for sure. You
Totally
can't say that
agree.
anymore, you don't think?
I don't believe so
Hmm.
anymore. I don't believe we have a Pacific Northwest style. I mean, I believe the people that started out, we still use it. I believe we do.
Yeah.
Whether that's wrong or right, it don't matter. It's like, the fact of the matter is the industry here has went from what we started out as a Pacific Northwest style to a Eastern European very light roast, some people would call sour, to we're still with the Alfred Pete of the Pete's world, who started all this off. His signature dark roast, and that's just the way it is. We're the dark coast here. We've been
Huh.
known as the dark coast, and as you go east across the U.S. and definitely over into Europe, the coffee has always gotten lighter and lighter and lighter as it went.
Huh. That's interesting. Do you think that's why we see such a I'm gonna call it underdeveloped, for lack of better terminology, for this style of coffee? Do you think that's where our fascination with underdeveloped coffee came from, or do you think there's something else that contributed to this trend that feels like it's going on for a long time now? And is it a trend in your eyes, or do you think this is just part of how people drink coffee?
Well, there's about 10 or 15% of the market that's going to drink that underdeveloped coffee. Absolutely. Because they like some of that really raw notes in that. And whether it's right or wrong, it don't matter. It's something, people either like it or they don't.
Hmm.
If you're a business owner and that's what you want to concentrate on and that's what you're going to serve, well, you're going to get about 10 or 15% of the market. And pretty soon, I don't know if you can survive in Vancouver on 10 or 15% of the market. No way.
Right.
No way. Not with the cost today, If you're not serving a medium roast, for sure in that mix, whether it's a single varietal or even a blend, there's 60% of the market right there. Medium roast coffee fans of the world.
Right.
Thanks to Double Double at Tim Hortons and everything else, we've created that medium flavor, balance, heaviness on our tongue and stuff like that. And I'd say about 20% of the market here is dark roast. So 60, 20, 20. And, that's where we're sitting at. Majority of my blends, and I do light roast too, but I don't get the call for them all. The blends for sure, the medium roast, outsell them 80%.
Is there a difference between calling something a light roast and an underdeveloped roast that feels like it's really light? Like, to me, the difference is one's kind of an extreme version of the other, but I don't know. You're the
Well, the
expert.
fact, Sam, well, you are too. You're becoming an AST. You've been doing this a long time, and there's five things the human tongue tastes. One of them is sourness, and sourness is a defect in coffee, y'all.
Yeah.
We have two things that are guaranteed to be in coffee: bitterness and sourness.
Hmm. Right.
Bitterness will never go away. It will never go away. Sourness, we can change that perception. We can change that sourness. We can lift it off the tongue and turn it into acidity with sweetness. So you can still have that lively, bold feeling, just like drinking a high acidity, hoppy beer or something like that, way more lively and fresh on your tongue and that, and still have, your sweetness. You still have your mouth feel. You still have your acidity, but sourness is a defect, and that's where a lot of people want that wow factor.
It kind
It's
of
like,
feels like it's
hey,
a wow
wow,
factor,
wow.
right?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to leave that coffee and let it sit for 10 or 15 minutes and go back and drink it. And if you can drink it, then all right, no problem. But if you can't, that ought to tell you something. If you cannot drink your coffee when it cools down, there's a problem.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely, because it really changes as it cools.
Two
I
things massively change: acidity increases and sweetness increases. And any bad things with this coffee, sourness would greatly increase, any defects would increase.
Yeah.
So it's going to be becoming more apparent. And there's a lot of people doing these roasts and they're serving in a cafe, but they're manipulating their pours to make it actually taste pretty good, Sam.
Yeah,
There's
I, I,
machines
I,
out.
I I can have a pour over of something underdeveloped and appreciate it. but I wouldn't want to have it as my everyday cup, I don't
Well,
think.
some people are even running them through espresso machines, but will amplify that issue. And, there's a machine
Yeah.
out there that will do it. The reason we're talking about this is the biggest word in coffee. Every student I come across, and I pounded it through your head, and I will continue to pound it through all my AST's head, is the number one word of coffee is density. It controls the pick, it controls the processing, it controls how we roast it, it controls how we brew it. It's all about density, and that alone, that factor alone will tell you a lot about that product and why it's not able to produce the results of a 9-bar espresso machine when you got a light roasted Kenya that's really dense. Not going to work.
Right. Hmm. I heard something. I was at a symposium years and years ago as a bunch of coffee roasters got together at a conference, and we were talking about this underdeveloped light roast. At the time, it was felt like just a trend. And the consensus was that it was brought on because baristas were looking for something else to do. Once he kind of maxed out at their cafe, they wanted to be coffee roasters because that's the next kind of logical step. And when these baristas would go to their coffee roasters and go do cuppings, they weren't told that these cuppings or testing of coffee was to just test for defects. You're tasting for defects so you can reject or accept those green beans, right? And so all these, you can picture hipsters with their mustaches and tight pants going around slurping up coffees, doing their cuppings, and understanding incorrectly that this was really cool. And these coffee roasters are tasting this coffee. I've never tasted coffee like this. Well, it's because you weren't supposed to. These are the rejected coffees. You're either accepting or rejecting them. You roast those coffees to a very low grade so that you can taste the defects in them, and then you cup them. So these baristas then would take that newfound information that was wrong and come back, and they developed that taste. And then when they became coffee roasters, that's how they wanted their coffee to taste. And I thought that was a really interesting way to frame that issue. And I don't know, do you think there's any truth to that?
I agree with some of that, Sam, because we produce, when we sample roast, again, you nailed it. We're only looking for defective coffee, and that means it has to be a light roast. It has to be sour. I know as a coffee roaster, I can get over sourness. So we're going to take it right to that sour stage, right to the bread, maybe 1 minute after it starts into first crack, maybe. And that may be, a bad educational factor with letting these kids know why are we doing this exercise here? Is not to see how good this coffee can be,
Right.
it's to see how bad it really is.
Yeah. So we can reject it if we want to.
But I also think the reason a lot of this stuff over here is happening, Sam, is because they all look across the pond into what's happening in Europe. They're listening to James Hoffman, and they're
Right.
listening to Tim Windable, and they're listening to Soren and all these roasters that roast light coffees over there. There's even Canada. Scott Rowe's a great advocate for light roasted coffee and ratio coffee. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with any roasted light coffee. Doesn't bug me whatsoever and all that. But I think people look at it and they're like, okay, that's the way it is. Just like everything we read, Sam, on the internet or anything, there's a lot of internet experts out there, puking out a lot of information they've heard and they regurgitate it out to their standing and all that. But, when I'm talking about coffee roasting, I'm going to talk about coffee roasting on a particular machine at a particular setup because it doesn't happen against all the other machines. It's a parameter based thing. That's happened on a 22-kilo cast iron Probot. That's not going to happen on that Diedrich, or that's not going to happen on that Gießen.
Right.
Okay, so everything that you read out there, it has to have context behind it. There's a lot of information coming out, and they go, "That's it, the 2-to-1 ratio. That's it." Okay, well, let me tell you about that. So I think everything has input, has value.
Right.
People, that's why I love coffee, Sam. Everybody can approach it differently and still be successful.
Yeah.
And
And
there's
you can
nothing
choose
wrong
to
in
buy
that.
it or not and choose to enjoy it or choose not to enjoy it. I mean, it's taste, and taste is subjective, I guess.
You
Right?
know, Sam, I think we both started off like that, like we're going to be the top. We're going to only do this stuff. And I think after me, 35 years in business and you 25 or more, 30 years probably,
Yeah.
we start looking at where's the market at, where's everything really going to make it to work for as a business. We start off as coffee nerds, professional, our nose stuck up in the air. I'm not going to buy that coffee because of that. And eventually we come down and realize we're idiots.
Yeah.
We need to look at really, I started off going and volunteering over 1,500 days in East Africa through USAID and Coffee Corps. I
Wow.
traveled a lot. I didn't have to pay for my travel, but I never ever got paid for my time. I learned so much. The much value I got out of all this was literally amazing from all the people and the way they approached it and the way they took on these projects and stuff like that. And so there's much to be learned, to be shared, to be understood. I think the education factor that is happening in the industry right now is really good. I think there's some great ASTs out there that are willing to share all the secrets of what is working, because I believe that we need more good coffee. We're going to have a much, much, much more consumption happening over the next 50 years. We're going to have an imbalance of supply for darn sure.
Hmm.
And so everybody better get prepared for more expensive coffee because more people are drinking it. We're still having climate issues. We're maybe losing some crop, blah, blah, blah. But the product is here to stay, and we'll have to find that value for everybody that finally says, I can't pay that anymore.
Well, I think it's easier to make something uh, make something not good into something good. It's easier to elevate a product to a point where the consumers are going to be okay with it. I I don't know. I think we're still going to have really high end coffee, but you're right. It's going to come at a real premium, kind of like food. We're going to be able to go out and eat, but I think the the mid range kind of restaurants are in trouble. We're going to be left with fast food and really unattainable high end cuisine that most of us won't be able to afford. This is one really not utopic version of the future. I kind of see that with coffee too. I think that we're going to have a lot of cheaper coffees available that maybe we can make taste really good at a maybe an affordable price for most people. But then we're going to have these really high end coffees that are going to be what we would now consider good coffees, are going to be extremely good and hard to get because of climate change. For one thing, they're going to be harder to grow in high altitudes, and supply and demand. I think both those issues are going to really spike the price of coffee and eliminate maybe a whole part of the coffee industry.
Let me put something into perspective, Sam.
Please do.
The cost of coffee per pound to me, green, is pretty big. But when you break it down as a retailer, and I sell you a pound of coffee for $12 or $14, and you break that down into what it cost me to brew a double shot of espresso, we get into the reality of, oh, it's still pretty cheap.
Yeah, still
You know,
48, 52 cents, something like that,
50
right?
to 50 cents. Let's
Yep.
say 50 cents for a double shot, that's just, the cost of putting that in the cup, and we're pushing that out the door for $4 or $5. So the markup is great. I don't foresee the coffee industry having a problem with outrageous cost because I can raise my cost by $1 to my customers as a wholesaler, and it makes a difference of about 3 pennies in their cup.
Right.
Minuscule. Minuscule, but that dollar for me is huge. It's survival sometimes when you're talking as a wholesale. That's a huge percentage of a $6 coffee or something like that. So, but here's the thing I want to lead into, Sam, and you
Hmm.
started this off in the early days, is I think the biggest factor now is what's happening with our labor issue.
Yeah.
And we are now looking at Vancouver's 17.65 an hour right now. They just went up to per minimum wage. I believe California is hitting well into the 17 or $18 US dollar range.
That just happened. Yeah.
Seattle's well up there too, and everything, all the other costs that are increasing. I don't know if coffee's really our issue.
Mm,
I think it's labor. I think it's bureaucracy. I think it's taxes. I think it's cost of other goods. Bags have increased
I
greatly.
know. Holy.
All those other things that are literally you have to have type of stuff. So, and this leads me into the fact of now I see a shift in the marketplace of these cafes going, okay, I ain't buying that La Marzocco anymore. I'm going to buy that Eversys, and
Mm,
I'm going to have a person push a button, and I'm going to have no labor cost or
right.
low labor cost. I'm going to spend $60,000, $70,000 on a super automatic espresso machine. And Sam, they will do 90% of the good as a barista will do day in and day out if they're maintained. So that's where the market is now. There's a bubble. There in here in Vancouver and Richmond, I believe there's a robot bubble tea maker going on now.
Right. I was just going to say, bring on the robots at this point.
They're
And
here. They're
I got
coming,
real
and
mixed feelings about that. I mean, I love technology. I've got no problem with technology, except it takes the humans out of it. And what the humans add to coffee is like it's your hands. Your hands are the only thing between the tools and the coffee that make a difference. You come into a coffee shop that's a manual cafe with people making coffee, and every barista, given the same parameters, are going to make a different cup of coffee. And I love that. I love that so much. There's a variety, and that variety is made with that curvature in your finger. When I train people to evenly distribute their coffee, I'm like, and you need this curve. And I know a plastic surgeon who can give you the Sam Jones curve on there to get it just right every time. And that's part of the price of making coffee that I'm prepared to pass on to my customers. I
I
don't.
think they need to. I think if not the customers, I think all the people in the industry, the baristas need to know how to basically do this, how it started in the time to understand. Our hands tell us a lot about this, and the distribution in that portafilter is the single most important thing that happens. And,
Right.
and and you can either do it with a tool or your fingers, it doesn't matter at that point. But it's happening. But Sam, I want to bring up one more thing. We all talk about quality. We
Right.
all strive for quality. And rightfully so. We believe that's the benchmark for success in the industry and stuff like that. But coffee has a different factor. We cannot judge success by quality in our industry, not whatsoever. There's some very busy and successful coffee shops that don't sell quality coffee, and they're successful. They got a lineup out the door. They're always busy. The bridge to relationships is coffee. They like where they go. They like the people in this shop. They're
Mhm.
okay with the product. That's where it is. Quality is still not taking over that threshold of people are going to never always just say, well, I'm not going to walk 6 more blocks just for that coffee. No way.
Right. So it's the environment, it's the experience that the
It's the
customers are
experience, and it
judging you
always
on,
has been the
right? Yeah.
experience. There's more business done over a cup of coffee than anything else in the world right
Right.
now. And so it's the experience, it's the person you meet across that cup that you're going to remember more than that cup of coffee.
Right. And it is that cultural interplay that makes cafes successful everywhere. I mean, they're the cornerstone to every community. Every new development needs a cafe as an anchor tenant, basically, to help build that little community. It's not about the coffee they're putting there. It's the fact they're putting tables and chairs and a product that people can converse over, right? Is that what
I'd
you're
say
saying?
85, 90% of them are coming there for the camaraderie and not necessarily just to get the coffee. They could do
Yeah,
the same thing at home.
they
Why
sure
are
can.
you not doing it at home? if you're after the coffee, because you're going to get it just as good a cup as home if you're brewing, certain different ways. Even with the espresso technology today, for $2,000, you can have a home unit that can brew just as good as espresso as a cafe now.
Right? But don't you need to know how to make coffee? You can buy a $2,000 machine for home, but doesn't education, I'm going to lead you into this, doesn't education mean something to produce a quality product at home or at work? I'm thinking mostly at home, because people will buy a $2,000-$3,000 machine and a grinder, and then what are they just going to try to figure it out?
It's always the education. I had two Amazon, a married couple, husband, wife, software engineers making big bucks, couple $100,000 a year each, come in and take my barista class. But all the husband came along because the wife wanted to do it.
Okay.
But about 20 minutes into the class, she wanted to know when latte art started. I said, it ain't starting today. This is not about latte art class. This is about, we'll do a little bit, but blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh. I said, is that what you want? And she's like, yeah.
Hmm.
So what do you got? She had a Breville. So I was like, all right, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do another half a day with you. You bring in your Breville and we'll start making coffee on that, and we'll show you how to get the best out of it. She came in, she brought it in, she exclaimed she'd never get latte art out of it. So I made a wager. If I can do this on my first shot, my first pour, and I can get some type of latte art on there, you got to take another class with me.
Does the
She said,
blob
"Oh,
count, or did it have to be?
no, I had a really nice heart,
Oh,
actually, and it
okay.
was a Breville machine. And it's really about, you're right, education, but it's not on the coffee, Sam. It's how to use the equipment.
It's how to use the equipment that they've got, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
coffee is really the byproduct. Everybody doesn't understand this equipment. They tell the Breville people, they just turn it on, it's ready in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No, there's a reason why you got to keep it on, and blah, blah, blah. So I've done this for a few customers and friends, and we go to their Breville, and after it's over, they're like, man, I'm pouring some great shots. And they are, and they're doing latte art on these Breville machines and DeLonghi's and stuff like that. So is it possible? 100%.
And it makes the customer happy and appreciate the coffee more. And then they're deeper into the coffee industry themselves. And
They're the ones that are going to push the industry forward more than anybody else, because now they're going to go to different roasters and go, oh, why is your coffee so underdeveloped, or man, just a little bit, or what, it makes him start thinking about, now what coffee am I putting in my machine?
right.
And how does it change that? So it opens up the arena to them, other than them taking, they're becoming the expert.
Right. Which you kind of, I don't know, that's kind of a frightening thought, thinking that your customer is the expert when you're supposed to be the expert on this side of the counter. I mean, it does make a greater, more equal playing field, I think, and it certainly clears up any transparency, or it makes more transparency to what the cafe is doing and what the coffee roaster is offering.
100%. I would rather dumb up the industry instead of dumb it down,
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's dumb. It just needs
It's
to be
dumb.
dumbed
We
up.
can be really dumb and stuff. So, the more education, the more we know. And you know what, Sam? Starting coffee in Seattle from 92 through 2005, 2006 was a blessing, because it was such an educated market already. David Schomer, Vivace, and
Yeah.
Ed Liebrich, and Marzocco was there, and there was a lot of long-term, high-quality Cafe Vita early. A lot of people going into the business, and a lot of coffee coming out of these cafes, and good and bad coffee, and so there was a lot of ability in Seattle to discern quality, and that's how everything started off first in Seattle, was
Yeah.
coffee quality first, drew everything.
And
And
you
then
were
there's like,
with what company in Seattle?
well, I helped Lighthouse Coffee Roasters for a while, but we had a Heinz Public Market Coffee down there. We started in front of the 14 Karat Cafe.
Mm.
We pushed out a cart from about 6 in the morning if we woke up in time.
Yeah.
About 4 in the afternoon, no matter what the weather was outside, 7 days a week, we served the restaurant behind us and everybody on the street. We did that for 5, 6, 7 years, and
Wow.
that and drive-throughs are what built Seattle coffee.
Yeah.
Period. They gave access to the people in many different ways to come and have a cup of coffee, and many different characters serving that coffee. And that was the key, you know. I remember my first latte was 1989 here in Vancouver, Sam, and I thought that was a game changer because my dad had fed me Folgers all my life, and that was nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know how my dad could drink that stuff black, to be honest with you.
Ooh.
And so, and then I made it down to Seattle and stumbled upon a place and had a coffee that day. And that's where I really realized that, wow, Vancouver is still a few years behind what's happening down here. And as an American and a Canadian, first an American, I concentrated on, I commuted down there for a long time. I spent a lot of time down there learning and commuting and volunteering and sucking it up from everybody, listening to everybody. But you know, I started believing what everybody said until it didn't work anymore, and I came across the analogy. Go, okay, well, maybe trust but verify
Yeah. I love that one. Trust but
before you
verify.
go all in, because you can spend a lot of time and money, and you're like, shit, that ain't working.
Mm-hmm.
Or excuse my French right there, or language,
That's okay. We can beep that out later.
but you know, the reality is, I think everything started on quality there, and everybody shared a lot of how they were doing things. There was no secrets, you know. Most people, Don Hawley and Danny O'Neill and all these guys in SCA and Don Cox and I can't even name them all. They were free to talk and share and tell you what's working for them and even tell you point blank, I don't really know what's going on, but it's working somehow. You
It
know,
doesn't feel like we have that anymore in the industry. We don't feel like it's so collaborative. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm a little bit removed from it, but it feels like we were more collaborative back in the day, and now it feels like there's a lot of different people doing their own things and not really
economics, Sam,
helping.
you know, the SCA education factor is the key, is the reason for that, I believe. You know, economically, we charge for our knowledge now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, kind of the way the world works, in that, you know, you start off as a grassroots thing and you share until you go, okay, can we do anything? And everything you do has to have an economic model and sense to it, I believe, or it's not going to last. You know, you can't be a philanthropist without money.
So the specialty coffee industry basically started in mid '80s, mid to late '80s. Do you think, or even a
I
little
would
bit
have to
before?
say, you know, I think the first part of the specialty coffee industry is when Alfred Pete plugged in his roaster in Berkeley and started roasting in the 60s.
Okay.
But we didn't know it was specialty then until Ted Lingle and his brother, the Lingle brothers, started the Specialty Coffee Association, because they knew that there was a lot of difference in quality of coffee. They had a
Yeah.
coffee company, but they knew there's like, wow, that coffee's not good, but that's way better. And so, is that special? Why is
Huh.
that special?
Huh.
You know, and so Ted and his brother started it, and they grew this organization up to be the leading specialty coffee association in the world. And then it merged with the Specialty Coffee Association of Europe, and it's turned into the SCA. And that's been good and bad, I believe, in many different ways in that. But to answer your question, I think economics has stopped that spread and that transfer of knowledge because people guard that as an economic value.
Right. Guys like us, though, we want to give out more information and tell more people. It feels like I've always been an open book with knowledge, and I know you have. You've shared so much with so many people. How are you doing that now? I know you have the Vancouver Coffee Academy. What is that really quickly, and how's that working for you? And what's the purpose behind Coffee Academy?
It's wrapped around the SCA education system at this point. Been here about 9 years. And it's based on the curriculum of the SCA has produced, taught in about 14 different languages, I believe, right
Wow.
now, worldwide.
Wow.
Very successful system, very well maintained. It's a living document. They're not afraid to change it, to say, okay, we figured something else out. We're going to change that. We're going to change, and that's what I like. And that's what that's what I've seen happen, Sam. We sat on tech standards of the SCAA for 20 years. We were volunteers. We didn't get paid. We put all our money and time in. We did programs where we would sit in a room and brew thousands of shots of coffee and check those just to see how a grind would change a dark roast to a medium roast to a light roast, and that was because of Bunn sitting on these, and all these manufacturers letting their people sit on these standards committee and share these information and do these tasks and go forward with it, and then eventually World Coffee Research comes around, and the biggest factor is all the universities, Texas A&M and K-State and Portland State and UC Irvine has a whole section for coffee now.
Wow. Yeah.
And I believe, now we have the research money coming in that's given us the ability to say, let's verify what we really have. We have the money to do it. Let's do it. Some of the things we thought were right ain't right. That's the like, all right, dang. But
Now
some
we're
of the things
spraying our
we knew
coffee
were
before we
right.
grind it.
Yeah, some of the things we knew or we thought we were right, it just confirms we are. And so I
Right.
think it just moves an industry forward in the right direction of kicking the dead dog off the porch that ain't working and moving forward to the things that do. And I think that is the education factor of spreading this. I will share with all my colleagues. I don't care. They come in here, watch me roast. I help them fix their equipment. I'm all for everybody in this town or in this region to keep up in roasting. I have no fear of competition, Sam. But
Right.
the people that need to understand this are the people that are wanting to go into business or do something. I tell you what, the first 3 years, 80% of my students weren't even in coffee.
There are just people who are interested from the public.
Interested or retired and looking for a
Yeah.
different career, or their kids were in coffee and they wanted to learn a little more about it and stuff like that to help them through and stuff like that. And I'd say the next 3 years that has switched. I say a lot more people in the industry are looking, how can we really move forward on this product and all that and that. And so we have a school here called Vancouver Coffee Academy. We've probably had 800, 900 students in the last probably eight years.
That's amazing.
And
That's a lot
all,
of people.
and all that. And some of them have went on to open up roasters in this town right now. 3 or 4 of them. And I'm happy for that. I installed their equipment. I'm helping them put it in. Competition, if anybody fears it, they're wrong, man. They have no confidence in what they're doing. There's enough to go around. If you do it right and your colleagues instead of competitors, everybody can win in this industry.
Yeah.
The only people that lose is the consumer when you start trying to, change the narrative and screw your buddy or something like that. It just don't work so well.
No, it never does to screw people around. And the customers do. They'll figure that out on their own.
Sam, we see that when you get into Asia, they all want to come over here and learn in North America. They don't believe what their country people teach them.
Huh.
They don't have the experience. They haven't had the experience, nor have they had the success of people over here. Because they're like, all right, well, they've been really successful. We're going to go let them train us and teach us. There's a difference between a person getting an AST license and he took all the classes and he's been in coffee for 3 or 5 years to a person that's got all their licenses and he's been doing coffee for 25 or 35 years.
Yeah, it's a difference for sure, isn't
Well,
it?
there's a lot of difference between being book smart and street smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And coffee roasting is a lot. I can talk about certain things that are going to happen, but they're not going to happen for a long time. You have to understand it. Some of these other people, if they haven't roasted enough or over, I've probably roasted on 20 or 30 or 40 different makes and models of coffee roasters. And that right there opens up my eyes, just like the different amount of espresso machines and grinders and stuff like that. At the end of the day, they're all doing the same thing, you know?
Yeah, you're putting
Well,
coffee through the process, trying to get a drink that you like, or that the majority of people like. I certainly aim for that 60% most of the time. I
you
like
know,
that breakdown of the 20-60-20 you were talking about.
and it is
Good.
happening. And also, the industry has shifted a little bit because I believe that the younger crowd is walking away from the alcohol and going more into the coffee, which is good.
Yeah.
And number two, I also feel as though that the older market too is finally realizing and the benefits of the health benefits of coffee.
Full of
You know,
antioxidants, right?
the polyphenols, the
Yeah.
antioxidants, and stuff like that. They say you need to drink 2 to 3 cups a day of coffee, decaf or regular. Don't matter. It's not about the caffeine, y'all. It's about everything inside of this cup. No sugar, no cream. Massive amount of health benefits, proven health benefits for this product. And I believe the more people are realizing that, they're like, oh, cup of coffee or a beer, you know?
Hmm.
So I think that alone is a change, especially in developed countries, especially as people are coming through the system, educational wise. They're learning more about it, they're understanding more about it, etc.
Right. And you would know, I'd love to be able to get into the different projects you're working on around the world, but there's not enough time on this one little podcast. But maybe I have you back when we talk about what's going on in other parts of the world where you're working and how that's working for you. Always interesting stories for sure. But John, thanks for coming on short notice like this. I really appreciate it. And I love talking to you about coffee.
Sam, I want to leave you with something over here
All right.
as a business owner and as a wholesaler and seeing a lot of cafes around here. You know, it's pretty cutthroat over here. There's a lot of competition and all that over here, and there's not a lot of camaraderie. Where we kind of look over there at you guys and we're jealous because you seem to all have a little better touch of fellowship and camaraderie and helping each other out and stuff like that more so than they do here in Vancouver. There's a
Huh.
lot more, blah, blah, blah stuff going on where, you guys seem to have your shit together a little more over there.
Well, we're a tighter packaged
Community.
group of people. Our geography makes it so we have to be closer, I think. In Vancouver, you're a little bit more spread out. Maybe that's part of it. People feel safer to criticize from a distance.
Mr. Jones, always remember to keep it greasy.
You bet,
Thank you, my
Sanders.
friend.
Thanks so much for being here. Everyone, that's John Sanders from Origins Coffee in Vancouver, British Columbia. Also part of the Vancouver Coffee Academy. Get your education on, folks.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks,
Enjoy your
John.
day.
And Kaylin, wherever you are, I know you're going to be nice to everyone. I'm going to be kind. And that's the Bread and Butter podcast for this week. We're out of here.
Bread and Butter Collective's membership includes the following local businesses: 2% Jazz, Bunny's Kitchen, Buzz Coffee House, Eagle-Ite, Big Wheel Burger, Blue Mountain Solutions, Bodega Tapas Wine Bar, Eva Schnitzel House, Farmsgate Foods and Catering, Victoria Chocolate and Company, Drum Roaster Coffee, Habit Coffee, Foo Asian Street Food, the Culinary Arts Program at Camosun, Cafe Fantastico, Fall Epi, Harold Street Brewworks, Hey Happy, House of Botang, Nikkei Ramen Ya, Jenny Marie's Cracker Company, La Pasta, La Rue Patisserie, Mocha House, Part and Parcel, Poco a Pinto Bar, Pizzeria Prima Strada, Keating Pizza, Roast, Table 9 Consulting, Sherwood Cafe and Bar, Sweets by Selena, The Collective Wine Bar and Kitchen, The Drake, Tapa Bar, The Nimble Bar Company, Ruth and Dean, The Whole Beast, The Wienery, Spoon's Diner, Truffles-Inspired Catering, and Zambries.
To hear more from the Bread and Butter Collective, go to checknews.ca/podcasts, on Check Plus, or find us on your favorite podcasting platform.